On July 25th, 2023, an anonymous caller contacts the DCFS hotline, begging them to conduct a wellness check on a family living in Rock Island, Illinois. And it's not just child abuse, it's not just neglect. The caller claims that a 10-year-old boy died in the family's home 7 months ago, and his mother has been hiding his body in the basement. Now, before we get into today's case, I want to let you guys know that it does revolve around the death of a child, and it's not exactly graphic, but it can be, of course, quite upsetting. So if that's something you're sensitive about, please just be wary of that. On a hot summer day in July of 2023, the hotline for the DCFS, which is the Department of Child and Family Services, received a phone call on their hotline. And the woman on the phone, she sounds really nervous about something, and she's really reluctant to share her identity. She says, "My safety is involved in this." And she emphasizes to the worker on the other end that she really doesn't want to say who she is or what her name is or where she's calling from. Like, she's clearly scared. But despite her fear, she wanted to say something really important, something that has been weighing on her. The only thing that we do know about this woman is that she's calling from Florida. And she says, "I don't know how to go about this situation, but have you heard anything about a little boy who shot himself in the head?" And the operator says, "No." There's a brief silence, and the woman on the phone takes a deep breath. And then she says something that's clearly been weighing on her for quite some time. And she tells the worker that she's deeply concerned about a family that's living in Rock Island, Illinois. She claims that a 10-year-old boy died around December of 2022, so like 8 months prior to this. And it's not even like in Florida where she lives. She's calling about a family in a completely different region to her. And she told the worker that his mother, a woman named Sushi Staples, has been hiding his body ever since. And she thinks that his body is being hidden in the basement of their home. Now, when the DCFS worker hears this, they're completely, they're shook. They're completely taken back by this because they get a lot of calls regarding, children who are in really concerning situations because that's what the hotline is for. But this was an entirely different situation. They had never gotten a call like this in regards to a dead child, one that's, been hidden by their own mom. The DCFS worker on the phone explains to the woman that unfortunately their department can't actually do anything about this because they can't conduct unprompted, unannounced welfare check on families. Only the police can do that. So the worker tells this woman, you need to call 911. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it from this end. After that, they talk for a bit and then the call ends. But here's the thing, right? This actually wasn't the first time that this woman had called about this family. Back in December of 2022, the same month that she claimed this little boy shot himself in the head, Rock Island police actually did receive a phone call from this same woman. And it was a similar situation. She was very, very nervous, very reluctant to say who she was. The only information she revealed was that she was calling from Florida, so she wasn't in the same state. And she explained to them the exact same situation and really emphasized that she did not want to be identified out of protection for herself and out of fear that the person she was calling about would come after her or something. But essentially, she asked the police if they heard about a little boy who shot himself in the head and that he belonged to the Staples family. Now, the police did look into this situation for a little bit, but when the tipster called back, they claimed that they couldn't find any evidence that this boy even existed. So we have a woman saying, this little boy has gone missing. I've heard this happened to him. And the police are like, well, we looked into it, but it seems like he doesn't exist. So nothing came out of that situation. And now it's July 2023, months later, and the stories aren't really matching up because DCFS do have records confirming that this 10-year-old boy, Zion Staples, exists. But the police don't have any records of him. So as far as their system was concerned, the child didn't exist at all, which meant someone was lying and they were going to find out who. Now, who exactly is Sushi Staples and what was really going on behind closed doors at that home in Rock Island? Well, the DCFS worker pulled up the file on this woman, and this is what they found. Her name is Sushi Staples. She's a mother of 8 children. Many of them are under the age of 14, and she's the primary caregiver. It seems like dad isn't in in the picture. So she's a single mom. And in 2022, like their whole family was living together in a house in Rock Island, Illinois. And this family wasn't exactly unknown to DCFS, like not even close. It seems like their involvement with them goes all the way back to like 2003 to 2004. So for like 2 decades now, they've been kind of involved and in contact. And it wasn't over like a minor situation. So way back then, during that time, Sushi's 2 oldest children were removed from the home. Like the situation was serious enough to the point the state had to step in and like physically take the children away. Now, we don't have clear information as to what exactly happened because it's, private information regarding this family, but it seemed pretty serious. Then in 2021, there was another complaint that was filed against this family. So investigators looked into it, but then they just like closed the case and nothing came from it. But there is more. There is another detail the DCFS worker came across, and it's something that would later become absolutely crucial to this entire case. They noticed that Zion and his siblings weren't actually enrolled in any school, like at all. So they had no teachers who were able to like check up on them or like take their attendance. There was no one to keep an eye on these kids other than their mom, Sushi. And the reason this is very, very important is because when kids aren't enrolled in any school system, it means that if they were to disappear, if they were to go missing, no one would notice unless the parents themselves, call this in. So now the worker is looking at this anonymous tip and they're looking at the file in front of them and they decide that they've seen enough for them to take action. So they decide to contact the police themselves. On the evening of July 25th, 2023, the Rock Island police get a phone call and they're arranging a welfare check on the Staples household. And they have one objective. They're specifically looking for a 10-year-old boy named Zion. Okay. So 2 officers, they go over to the house and Sushi answers the door. And you can tell she's a little startled by their presence, because it's like kind of late at night and she was not expecting for like police officers to just show up unannounced. But the officers ask, "Do you know anyone by the name of Lutricia?" And Sushi's like, "What? No. What?" And she looks really confused, but also really reluctant to like say more than that. But then the officer explains, well, there's this woman who called DCFS and they made a claim that you had a child who shot himself. And Sushi like immediately goes without missing a single beat. "Oh, absolutely not. I'm so sorry about this. My ex-husband, his new girlfriend is off the chain. I had to file a police report against her and a restraining order against her." Basically, she goes on to explain that she's being like stalked and harassed by this woman named Tony, which is her ex-husband's girlfriend. And that this person, Tony, has been harassing her like relentlessly and just like would not leave her alone. And the way that she's like telling this story, she's quite loud, visibly upset as she's talking about it, like almost emotional. It does truly sound like someone who is the victim of a stalker and like someone who's really exhausted by the situation. That aside, you could tell that her response to the, officer saying a claim like this, like, "You have a son who possibly shot himself," she's like really almost like offended by it, or outraged, I guess is a better word, by these accusations. She specifically says, "This is a Uranus accusation," whatever that means. But anyhow, she goes on to tell the officers, like, "I'm concerned. I have 4 daughters inside. I've been living in this house for 6 years. I've never had any issues. And I'm especially not letting you in without a warrant." Because the officers do say, "We're here in regards to a missing child. Can we check the house?" And she's like, "No." And she's a Black woman. So she says, "I'm not about to have my Black rights violated." Now, I'm going to take a quick pause here, right? Because there's something that happens in this interaction that a lot of people online are furious about, like myself included, because I watched the body cam footage of this whole interaction. And when the officers first show up, they immediately name drop the woman who called DCFS, right? They tell Sushi that Lutricia, I think I said Lutricia earlier, which is my mistake. It's actually Lutricia, called in regards to the situation when she specifically told the DCFS worker that she did not want her identity involved in this out of her own like protection and safety. And you know what? The officers even go on to tell Sushi that this woman clearly knows Sushi and her family, that they're like quite close or whatever. And Sushi denies all of this, right? So at this point, the officers don't know who to believe. They only know what they've been told. But people were very furious. And this is actually a really terrible decision by the officers because a lot of these people, they live in low-income areas with higher than average crime rates. So sometimes in these communities, if you get police involved in a situation that doesn't exactly concern you, sometimes you're labeled as a snitch. And this can actually be very dangerous for you. And the caller knew that, which is why she wanted to remain anonymous. But the police just name dropped her straight away and put her in like direct danger. So a lot of people online had a lot to say about this. Like there were a lot of comments saying, what the hell? These officers don't know what they're doing. Why did they say her name? And I agree. I don't think that was the right thing for them to do. When Sushi heard this name, right? When she heard the name Lutricia, she was kind of taken back by it, but she was like almost composed at the same time. Like her face had a brief reaction like, oh, no. And she denies knowing anyone by that name. Anyhow, this is the exact reason why people are afraid to call the police and make reports, because they don't want to get involved and they don't want to get in harm's way. And this is actually a perfect example as to how the officers did not respect, the anonymity of this woman who called about this situation. But anyhow, the conversation lasts for a little bit, but in the end, like the officers leave. They can't really do anything because they don't have a warrant and Sushi doesn't want to let them inside. But it's not like they gave up and they were done with the situation. They decided to come back the next day on July 26th, and this time they had a search warrant for the house. So officers arrive at Sushi's home, and there are several of them. Like the night before, there was only 2 officers, but this time there's like 6 to 8. There's a lot of them. And they ask Sushi to step outside, and you can see she's like very, surprised to see them again. She's telling them how last night it was like really traumatizing for her children. Like, you guys, like, what are you doing? Like, you're back here. But they handed her the warrant. So the officers are coming into her home whether or not she likes it. So it doesn't matter that she's a bit scared and nearly in tears and visibly stressed. And to be fair, this is a stressful situation. Like for anyone to have like police pull up on you like this, it's stressful. And whether or not you have something to hide, like imagine if this was you. Maybe you don't even have a son, right? And the police are showing up to your door, insisting you are hiding a dead child who doesn't exist, all because your partner's ex or some random woman from Florida called in saying you have a dead child in your basement. Like imagine if you don't and they've just pulled up to your house. Like that's really, really scary. But anyhow, one officer heads upstairs to check for adults in the house because it's a safety concern. They have to see how many adults are in the house. They know that there are 4 children there. So you have 2 officers staying with Sushi to make sure she doesn't go anywhere and 2 officers going down into the basement. Now, the officers, they're looking around. The basement isn't that big. There's not that many stuff. So it's quite quick for them to look around. They check the items and whatnot, but it seems clear. Like nothing seems out of place. There is this one like huge rusty like water tank in the corner and they go up to it and like give it a tap to see if there's anything inside of it, but it's like completely hollow. So after this, they're like, okay, well, basement seems clear. So they head back upstairs and they sit with Sushi at the dining table. And the officers ask her directly, did you have a son named Zion? Were you claiming benefits for a son named Zion? And Sushi's like, no. She just denies it all. But every time she says no, she does this thing where like her gaze drops or like she like looks away. And it's a really subtle thing that she does, but it's very consistent. Like every time she says no, her eyes go somewhere else. Now the conversation lasts for at least 40 minutes. You have the police trying to understand the full situation. They're just trying to figure out, where is this 10-year-old boy? Where is Zion? Because they know he exists. The DCFS has records of this boy existing. But Sushi is saying, no, he doesn't. I've never had a son named Zion. The DCFS made a mistake. And she even brought up the fact that she had her past involvement with them. And she just said that everything they did was a mistake. They're the ones who messed up, basically. Now, there was a lot of back and forth during this conversation. There was a lot of yelling. Everyone was being like quite loud and intense about it. And as this was going on, one officer comes back into the room and they're holding something, because during the time that like 2 officers are speaking to Sushi, the others are looking throughout the house, right? And he comes in and he's holding something. And you can just see like Sushi's eyes look towards it. And the officer is like, what's this? It's a birth certificate for Zion Staples. And they put it in front of Sushi. Her face is calm. Like you can't really read what she's like thinking or feeling. But the reason this is so like, oh my God, because during their conversation, the police had asked Sushi multiple times, do you have anything in the house that would like prove Zion's existence or like anything under his name? And she said, no, 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 no. And now look what they found, a birth certificate for him saying that she was the mother, clear as day. And she just goes silent. What was once like a pretty loud and like straightforward woman saying no to everything and denying his existence now has nothing to say. And she's not even looking at anybody. She's not even looking at the birth certificate. It looks like she's just like not there at all as she's like processing what's been placed in front of her. So after an hour of back and forth after this, she's finally taken into custody. And now the officers, they have something to confirm that Zion did indeed exist. So at this point, they start doing a more thorough, like intense search of the entire house, inch by inch. And hours pass, and other than the birth certificate, they actually find nothing. So at this point, they're kind of thinking, you know, like what's going on? Like this situation is just not making sense. She's saying this kid doesn't exist. We've searched the entire house and we can't find anything. Like this woman who called said there was a body in the basement. There was nothing in the basement. They checked. And they've, at this point, checked the whole house, besides one room, which is the garage. So at this point, you know, they're feeling kind of like low, like the morale is a bit low for the search. They haven't really found anything. The situation's very, very confusing. But one officer heads into the garage and he's looking around. And to give you a sense of this space, it's pretty empty. Like there isn't really a lot going on in the garage. There's no car in there, except for like one corner. It's like crammed with a bunch of like random stuff. And you can see him walking towards it. He's like looking through it. He like is pulling things out. And as he, you know, pulls things out, it reveals like this trash can that was like stuffed and almost like hidden in the corner. And it's wrapped in a black trash bag. And it's weird, he thought to himself, like, who wraps a trash can with a black trash bag? Like, that's just weird. But anyways, he pulls it out and it has this like immediately like very strong, intense smell coming from it. And it's like a weird smell he doesn't really recognize. So he immediately calls for backup and then more officers come into this room. And you can kind of see them like pull it out into the center of the garage and they're all surrounding it. Like this one almost like ominous object in the middle of the room. And one officer, you know, he puts his gloves on, safety first, and he goes towards it. He lifts up the lid of the can and he peers inside. And this is where they see the body of a 10-year-old boy who has been missing for months. Zion Staples right there, still wearing his Spider-Man pajamas. Some of the officers there, they had been on the force for years. They've seen dead bodies before. They've been in shootouts. But this was different. Some of them had to leave the room. Some of them couldn't even look at his body because there was also evidence of it being burnt. And the way that it was shoved into that trash can, it almost seemed like it was just shoved in there with like force, trying to cram it in as much as you can. And it was just horrible. It was so horrible to see a child in that type of state. Now, at this point, right, they have this trash can in front of them. They have a dead kid inside of it who's clearly been there for quite some time. And the way that it was found and the way that it was covered by everything seemed very intentional. Like this was put there deliberately to hide, to make sure that no one would ever find it. Now, with Zion found, this is a criminal investigation. So children were removed from the home. They were brought over to the neighbor's home next door, and they were also going to be questioned. And during this time, Sushi was already detained, right? So finally, you know, with everything that police have found now, proving that Zion did exist, and now that they have a body, this is when Sushi starts talking and she admits everything. And she admits that Zion did indeed die on December 21st of 2022, the same month that the woman from Florida who called the hotline had claimed he died. And when she admitted this, she's in tears. She's stressed, she's tense, and she's hysterical. But it almost seems like this was like a weight lifted off of her chest. You can tell that this has been weighing on her for a very, very long time. And it seems like for months, she pretended he didn't exist. I mean, she straight up lied to the officers, right? And told them straight up that this child didn't exist. Her own son, this child she gave birth to, didn't exist to her anymore. And now it seemed like this was the first time she actually got to say those words out loud and like, come to terms with the situation herself, that her son was dead and that she was hiding his body in the garage of their home. But she told the officers that she didn't kill him, that his death was an accident. He had accidentally shot himself in the head. And when this happened, she didn't report the incident. And the investigators were like, why? Why didn't you report it? And you can feel the energy in the room. It's heavy because, finding a dead child is never easy. Like any of these cases that involve children are just so horrific and just super depressing. Right? And to make this all worse, this was a mother who was like denying his existence and left his body rotting in a trash can for 8 months. But when she explained why she didn't report this in, she said that she was distraught, that she didn't know what to do. And not only that, she was also saying that she wanted to save up enough money to get an attorney first. So if she were to get arrested or like go to prison for Zion, like mishandling the gun because it was her gun, she wanted to make sure that her other children would be taken care of. And she said she was waiting to save up enough money for his funeral. But none of these, involved calling 911 or calling for help or like doing the right thing. Like to deny that a child ever existed is such a cold-hearted thing to do. And you can tell Sushi was a good liar. She was like avoiding people for months. 8 months. And to like, the cherry on top to like, really emphasize this whole situation, Zion was never enrolled in any school. So the only reason they even found him was because of that call that was made by that brave woman from Florida. She had called about the incident months prior, and she called again, like, good on her. She's like pretty much the only reason why Zion was even found. And finally, Zion can now be put to rest as well. So after they have Sushi, admitting to the situation and saying like, yes, Zion existed. I hid his body intentionally, but it was an accidental death. They still needed to get like more information. So they spoke to some of her kids. Now, the kids are very young, but 2 of her daughters are 12 and 13 years old. Like they're the oldest of the bunch. So the police speak to them to try to understand like what really happened. Because even though Sushi admitted to it, she's known to be a bit of a liar, right? Like she's lied about a ton of things, and they still need to like get other witnesses, like other testimonies of the people who were involved. And now with the kids telling, their side of the story, a full picture of what happened on December 21st starts to come together. So Sushi kept a gun in the house. It was her gun. And she did keep it like stored in a room, and it was locked, and you needed a key to access it. But somehow one of her kids had this key. And this happened like while Sushi was at work, and she left all of her children, over 5 children, at home unsupervised. And one of the kids had gone into their room. They were looking around like, kids are curious. They always want to sniff through things. And then when they left, they forgot to lock the door of that room. And then that's when Zion went inside, and he was snooping around too. And that's when he found the gun. And he doesn't know any better. He's just a 10-year-old boy. So he was playing with it. And then he shot himself in the head. And it went off, and all the kids in the home just like heard this huge bang. And they didn't know what happened. They just like followed the sound of where the bang came from and went into their room, and they just see their younger brother like laying there dead, covered in his own blood. Now her kids seem to be pretty smart though, because they immediately call Sushi and they're like, Mom, you have to come home. Like this is what's happened. So Sushi rushes home. And when she comes home, this is when she made her choice. Now, this is where it stops becoming a tragedy and this becomes a crime. Because this is where Sushi made the choice to not call 911, to not call the police, to not call the ambulance, nothing. She instead decided to hide his body, to place her 10-year-old son inside of a garbage can in their basement in their home. And then the most disturbing allegation of this entire case is that the two young girls told investigators that their mother had them help remove the blood from the carpet. Like they had to get down on their knees and scrub that carpet clean their dead little brother's blood off of the floor and then watch his body get dragged out. Like, oh, I really can't imagine that. Like, can you imagine being that age? Like they're so young. They're just little kids. And your mom is asking you to help clean up your dead sibling's body and blood. How can you do that to your children? Like, this is the thing about Sushi that really like confuses me. And I feel like a lot of people, because she had, claimed to the officers that she loved her kids and she was always trying to take care of them and that she was, really worried about what would happen to them, which is one of the reasons why she didn't report Zion's death at first, because she wanted to save up money for an attorney for her children to make sure they'd be placed somewhere good because she's a single mom, right? They don't have a dad that could take care of them. Yet you're putting your kids through this trauma. And not only that, the kids had to lie to everybody as well. So when you have people asking these kids like, oh, where's Zion? How's Zion? These kids would straight up lie about their brother and just like say some excuse about where he was. It's actually crazy. Now, initially, his body was kept in the basement. So that woman who called the hotline, she was right. The body was in the basement. But 2 months before July of 2023, Sushi admitted this to police. She then decided to move his body into the garage because she didn't want her 4 other children to find him down there. Again, I feel like that's such a contradiction because you don't want your kids to find the body down there, but the kids straight up already saw his body. They know he's dead. You made them clean up his blood. So I don't know. It just makes no sense to me. And after all of this, life just like continued for them, or as much as it could. So afterwards, Sushi just went to work. Like she carried on as normal as she could, while Zion's body was literally rotting away in the garage. And throughout all of this, she still received government benefits, on Zion's name. And when there was family members that asked about Zion and like, oh, how is he? We want to see him. She would tell the family members like, oh, Zion's in the hospital. He's being treated by something. He's recovering. He's not ready to see people. So not only was Sushi lying to literally everybody in her life for months, her kids also had to lie about what happened to Zion and also had to pretend that he never existed. Basically just like re-traumatizing them over and over and over again. Anytime someone asked about Zion, it was like a constant reminder that he did exist, but they had to pretend he didn't. In cases like this, if a child goes missing, the school is always one of the first places to like alarm it. Like if a kid is being abused at home or like something really bad is happening at home, usually teachers will notice something if a kid is like going through things because teachers know their children very, very well. If they have marks showing up on their bodies or if they're not coming into school anymore, they'll definitely report it. But in a case like this, no one knew because none of the kids went to school. So no one noticed. And it also begs the question, how were all of these kids being homeschooled by Sushi if she was also working a full-time job? A child had been dead for 8 months and the system pretty much had no way of knowing, which is why the police also had no records of Zion and why he wasn't found for so long. Now, when charges were filed, prosecutors came in with several serious counts: obstruction of justice, failure to report the death of a child, and concealment of a death. And altogether, they paint a picture of not just a really tragic accident, but a deliberate months-long cover-up of his death. Although this case never actually made it to trial because there was a plea agreement that was reached. Sushi, she did plead guilty, but to a single charge: child endangerment. In exchange, all of the 3 other charges were dropped. Now, the public reaction was very intense. People were very frustrated and angry about it because this case did kind of blow up a little bit in its local area because of just how horrific it was and how crazy it was. And people were really upset over the fact that charges like concealment of a death and obstruction of justice could just disappear like that as a part of like some sort of plea deal. And a lot of people were really, really unsatisfied with all of this. But I guess the silver lining in a really weird way, because plea deals can be very complicated, is that it spares the witnesses, like the children involved in this case, Sushi's other kids. It spares them from having to testify if this case were to go to trial. And it would be like re-traumatizing them over and over again, and to, make them relive what happened in a public space in front of strangers. At least the children didn't have to go through that. And unfortunately, sometimes certain charges are just harder to prove beyond a reasonable doubt as well. So, all of those things combined, there is a little bit of a silver lining. It doesn't make it okay, but yeah. And of course, it doesn't always feel like justice. And in a case involving a little boy wearing Spider-Man pajamas, a lot of people really feel like it didn't. But anyhow, on February 16th of 2024, Sushi Staples stood before a Rock Island County judge. And before she was sentenced, she did address the court. She said, "I realized, Your Honor, that my actions failed my children, my family, my community, my coworkers, and all who truly knew me." She said that she had always tried to do the right thing. But you know what? I feel like saying that doesn't mean much now after you've deliberately hid your child's body for months, denied his existence, lied to people about it over and over again, and all the things that she put her other children through. What do your words really mean then, But the judge did sentence Sushi Staples to 2 years in prison with 6 months mandatory supervised release to follow. Yeah, she only received 2 years for a child who spent 8 months in a garbage can. Someone who looked police in the eyes, looked at her own son's birth certificate and lied and denied his existence. Someone who made her 2 children clean up a bloody carpet of their younger sibling. Now, her sentencing is crazy. Only 2 years. A lot of people were saying she deserved so much more for what happened. But the nature of this case is a little different because no one was murdered. It was an accident, a very tragic accident, but it was also due to the fact that Sushi was an incapable mother in a lot of ways and, didn't lock up her gun safely. Why do you have a loaded gun at home with children at home who are unsupervised? It's all on her. She's the adult in this. She's responsible for this. But I do want to take a moment as well, before we end this video to kind of bring back the focus onto Zion because he was only 10 years old. He was just a little boy. And what happened to him was so tragic. Even though Sushi failed him as a mom in so many ways, the systems failed him too. Even though he wasn't in school, there's welfare checks or the prior DCFS involvement or the police who were called and told about the situation months prior, they could have done better too. They failed Zion too. And out of all of this, it keeps bringing me back to one question. What if that woman in Florida never made that phone call? If she had just stayed quiet, and minded her own business, how much longer would it have been before he was found? A year? 2 years? Would anyone have ever found him, ever? Now, one more thing I did want to note for real this time before we end. Word got around online that Sushi ventured into self-publishing after all of this. She released a book called From the Pit to the Palace, My Truth Untold. And this is a little bit of what the blurb says the book is about. It's about a woman who remains unbroken by life and its circumstances, unashamed of her faith and her walk with God. She is led from a life of street violence, sex, drugs, gang activity, sexual abuse, and the loss of a child through all of life's trials and tribulations back to her calling in ministry. So her book kind of goes through her trauma basically and the things that she went through in life. And she does talk a lot about her losing a child, the same child that she hid the body of and lied about his existence for months. Now, this is not 100%, but if this is true, this kind of fits into a pattern that we would recognize here because we also covered another case on this channel, Curry Richens, and she had poisoned her husband and she had 2 kids. And after her husband passed away, because they didn't know that she had killed her husband, she wrote a children's book to help her kids cope with the grief. The same father that she killed. What is up with these people writing themselves into the role of someone who's processing all of this pain and trauma when they are the ones who created it? At the end of the day, Zion deserved so much better. All of these kids deserve so much better. He deserved a mother who would have called for help. He deserved to be in school where someone would have noticed him. He just deserved better. Now, what did you guys think of today's case? If you guys have any thoughts that you want to share with me, feel free to comment in the section down below. Otherwise, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.